You should be able to turn that volume. I'm hard of hearing. You know, you got to have a speaker setting on there someplace. It's a new phone. You just never use the speaker.
I think Tracy just dropped.
See, I got a speaker. Same thing with my internet worked.
Did we lose somebody, Marie?
I think Tracy dropped. It's not showing a microphone for Tracy.
Okay. We're having some problems with our audio too. It's hard to hear everybody.
Yeah, that was why I switched to phone. It's because the internet was really sketchy.
Phone is sketchy too.
That's just nature's edge.
No, really.
All
like
right,
I
am
keep
I
getting
back?
dropped.
You're
You're
back.
back.
Okay.
Ugh.
Yeah, I can hear it now.
All right.
There
Did
we
you
go.
guys already get the meeting done before I got back?
Yeah, we're waiting for you a second.
Well, I'm glad you were gone because I just now got the speaker working.
You missed all the hair in Rick or his ear. He had a close shot for you.
Oh, bummer. I'll have to watch the replay. All right. Are there any additional items for this evening's agenda?
Yeah, this is Rick. I'd like to move the extension of the declaration emergency resolution from the consent agenda to 9 Bravo.
This is Troy. I'll second that.
All right, you get okay.
All right. Motion from Rick, second from Troy. Any discussion on that? With none, those in favor may.
Think the mayor's gone again.
Well, she could have got her vote in before she dropped at least.
I think I heard her say aye. That'd be you next, Rick.
Well, if that's me, this is Rick. I vote aye.
Troy, aye.
Mike, aye.
Becky, aye.
Tracy's having trouble too.
Mike, take over the meeting.
I don't. Let's give her a chance to get back on. Tell her to send her dog outside.
Tracy, I see you.
Okay.
Oh, there she is.
We all
Welcome
voted aye.
Did you all say aye? Are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Yep.
We did.
How come we can't see? Oh, she's just on the phone. We can't see Tracy.
Got it flipped to the left or right.
Oh, there she is.
All right. I don't even know where we are anymore. Approval of the evening's agenda. Approval of the evening's agenda. We've already removed that from the consent agenda to 9B. Anything else? Approval of the evening's
Mike,
agenda.
I move we approve
We've
the
already
agenda as
removed
amended.
that from the consent agenda to
This is Troy. I
9B.
second it.
Motion from Mike, second from Troy. Those in favor may state aye. Tracy, aye.
Rick, aye.
Oh,
Troy, aye.
Mike, aye.
Becky, aye.
the motion passes. Guests for this evening, we have our 2019 annual audit presentation from Bergden KDV, and Nancy Schulzenberg is with us this evening. Welcome, Nancy, and I'll turn this over to you to walk through the audit.
All right, good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
good. So hopefully you all have financial statements and the communication letter in front of you in some format. We'll start with the financial statements. And if I could have you all turn to page 2. Okay, so this is the independent auditor's report, and the first page of the report talks about the fact that these are the city's financial statements, and it was our responsibility to audit those financial statements. And on the top of page 3, you'll find our opinion paragraph. Is an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion that we can offer as your auditors. It is an indication that everything is fairly stated based on the results of our audit. Then we go in to talk about some of the other information in the report, and finally on page 4, we refer to government auditing standards. So these standards are required. We take a closer look at internal control and compliance, and this is required based on some of the funding that you receive as a city. So if you will, turn all the way back to page 87, which is where we'll find that government auditing standards report. So the first page of the report talks about the internal control work that we completed, and then does indicate that we did have some findings this year. They're the same as the ones you had last year, and we'll look at them in a little bit. And then the second page goes on to talk about the compliance work that we completed and indicates there were no compliance findings related to that, so that's all good. And then on the following page, page 89, you'll find our report on Minnesota legal compliance. So we complete a checklist that the Office of the State Auditor issues on an annual basis. It covers 7 broad categories of legal compliance. And based on that, we did have just one finding this year. And then on the following page, you'll find those findings. First of all, the internal control findings. We did have one prior period adjustment this year related to a fire department receivable that was received a little bit after year end and was not recorded as a receivable at the end of the prior year. So that was corrected for these financial statements. And then we have the lack of segregation of accounting duties. And this is at a significant deficiency. So we have 3 buckets that we can put our findings into, the most severe being a material weakness, and then that middle level being a significant deficiency, and that's where this is housed. And what I want to point out is that last year, we had 4 bullet points. 4 areas that we thought the city could probably improve on to, reduce this finding. And the city did correct 3 of the 4. So the bullet point that is left has to do with the fire board and some of the overlapping duties related to that. So you'll see that bullet point, and then below that in the city's response, you'll see some ideas about how to address some of those concerns. And then the last page, you'll find the current and prior year legal compliance findings. The one legal compliance finding we did have was a repeat from last year, and again had to do with the fire department. So there were some payments that were not due to those invoices not being submitted to the city timely. And then the other 2 findings that we had last year were also corrected. So the city staff really did a nice job of taking our suggestions and putting them into place for 2019. Questions on any of that? Okay, then we'll go to the other document, the communication letter.
I think so. I need his earbuds and his phone.
So in the front of this document, there's a letter, it talks about those findings, and then it goes over the same findings again on pages 3 and 4. I could have you turn to page 5. Pages 5 through 8 are titled required communication. So these are things that our standards require that we put in writing to all of you as the governing body of the city. Talks about our responsibilities, talks about government auditing standards, talks about timing and estimating used, and it would be our tool if we had anything significant or unusual that was uncovered in the audit, or if we had any disagreements with management. And happy to report tonight that there were none of those. Really standard language in this section. And then on page 9 is where we start looking at the financial information for the city, starting with the general fund. So the general fund, the first chart that we're looking at takes a look at the fund balance and compares that over the last 5 years. And we give a 5-year perspective for all of these chart graphs, but we really are going to focus in on 2018 versus 2019. So you can see that the fund balance by about 324,000. And that just had to do with the revenues exceeding expenditures in this fund for the year. The majority of the city's fund balance is unassigned at year end and therefore available for future spending. There is about $23,000 that has been spent on prepaid items, and so that's not available, but the other $2.36 million is available for the future.
I had to call in.
Moving on then to a little bit more detail, we have several charts that look at your general fund revenues. And you can see that for each of the last 3 years, revenues have increased. It was about a 4.5% increase, or about $170,000 for 2019. And there were some fluctuations between the categories. So when we look at taxes and assessments, that is the largest increase that you'll see, and that increased about $194,000 just with an increase in the general fund's tax levy. Other revenues were also up. That includes primarily an increase in investment income, just based on the market conditions that we were seeing at the end of 2019. Licenses and permits also increased due to increased building permits during 2019 as compared to 2018 and years prior. The charges for service actually decreased primarily due to the ash user fee no longer being collected with the closure of the Great River Energy during the year. And then also intergovernmental revenues were down. Last year you received a small city grant that didn't repeat in 2019, and also the fire aid for the Relief Association decreased for the year. Another way to look at your revenues is to compare them to the amounts that were budgeted or anticipated for the year. Look at that chart on page 11. You'll see that your revenues and other financing sources exceeded the overall final budget by about 7.6%, or $283,000. Several categories were very close to what was anticipated. A couple of them had some variances. First of all, licenses and permits was over budget by about $149,000, and that just had to do with conservative budgeting on those building permits. Other revenue category also over budget, and this is partly due to those investment earnings that you hadn't anticipated, and some miscellaneous revenues. And we typically do see very conservative budgeting when it comes to revenue. The intergovernmental category was also over budget, and that had to do with just conservative budgeting and kind of came in across all of the aids for the city for the year. And then one final look at this last chart takes a look at revenues by source. So you can see that the green bar there, the one on the far left, is by far your largest source in the general fund. That's your property taxes and special effects. Makes up anywhere between 83 and 87% of your total revenues, and was 85 for 2019. Other sources pretty consistently making up the rest of their revenue. And moving on to page 13, switching gears and taking a look at your expenditures. You can see that expenditures were up each year of the last 5, and did increase for 2019 as well, up about 5.4%, or $188,000. The most significant increase in this area had to do with the general government category, and that had to do with increased legal fees and increased repairs at City Hall, so up about $71,000. Public safety also up with increase in wages for officers. And then finally, public works increased about $66,000 due to increased wages, benefits, street materials, and street maintenance. So kind of a lot of categories contributing to that increase. And similar to the revenues, we can compare those expenditures to the budget. Expenditures came in very close to the budget, just a 1.1% variance or $41,000 under budget. All categories being under budget with the exception of general government. And that had to do with those legal fees again. And then also the city replaced several contracted positions this year with actual city employees, including planners and an accountant. The public works expenditures were under budget, about $101,000 due to budgeting conservatively for parking lot repaving and repairs and maintenance costs. And then finally, culture and recreation under budget due to some employee restructuring resulting in a decrease in parks employees for the year. And then again, one last chart on the expenditures that takes a look at those by function or where you spent your money. And when you look at 2018 and 19, you can see that they're exactly the same. So the percentages are the same, even though the overall expenditures did increase. Questions on the general fund at all? Okay, we have a couple of charts that take a look at your utility operations. First of all, your water fund. This fund did have significant increases in operating revenues for the year, about 33%. A lot of that had to do with additional water availability charges based on that increased development. So we saw the increase in building permits in the general fund and the increase in those WAC charges here in the water fund. Expenses increased about $49,000, and that just kind of was across the board with depreciation and wages and benefits for employees. So when we look at the overall operations of the fund, we show operating income in two ways. One with depreciation included and one without. Depreciation is a non-cash item, and that's why we look at it this way. And you can see the good news is for the water fund, in each of the last 2 years, you have covered not only the normal operating expenses, but also depreciation. So operating income with and without that for 2018 and 2019. The sewer fund is a little bit of a different picture. Revenues did increase in this fund too, but about 6% rather than the 33% you saw in the water fund. And operating expenses increased only about 0.5%. So pretty consistent with 2018 as far as that goes. And again, here we're looking at that operating income or loss two ways, with and without depreciation. And you can see that for each of the last 4 years, this fund has experienced a loss when we include all of the depreciation. But you are covering a portion of that because you're showing an operating income when we subtract that out. So about half of it being covered by your operating revenues for this fund. So those are the enterprise funds. And then we have one last chart that takes a look at some tax information. So the line on the top of this chart is going to be your tax capacity. And then in the middle is your tax capacity rate, and on the bottom is the levy. So overall for 2019, the levy decreased just very slightly. And based on what happened with your tax capacity, that rate was pretty much the same as it has been for the last 3 years, varying very, very minimally, a 0.07% between years. And the rest of this document just talks about an upcoming GASB standard that's going to change things a little bit for the city going forward. So that is the information I have. Does anyone have any questions? All right, well,
This
thank
is Rick.
you.
I don't have any questions at this time. I got to hear this once already, so.
Right. All right, well, thanks for giving me some time tonight. I guess I'll leave it at that unless anyone has anything else. Okay, well, have a good rest of your meeting.
All right, on to
On
committee
to committee
reports.
reports.
First committee report I want to give.
Casey, keep talking.
Okay. So the city of Becker has made the difficult decision to cancel the Freedom Days 2020. We have always held the safety of the event patrons volunteers, city staff, and our community as the top priority. Freedom Days relies on the volunteers and the donations of our businesses to run our celebration. Based on the challenges brought on by the COVID-19, we feel that canceling the event is the socially and financially responsible move to make at this time. We want to thank all participants, volunteers, and sponsors for the continued support. We will all see you next year. Also, the all city garage sales have also been canceled due to the executive order that the governor has provided at this time. We can definitely revisit rescheduling it in the fall. Moving on to other committee reports, budget and finance. Rick?
This is Rick. I can take budget and finance and planning here. For budget and finance, we met just after our council meeting 2 weeks ago. We got to hear the report from KDV that we just heard a few minutes ago here. Also talked about the numbers for through March. Obviously, the community center and then the restaurant operations were affected by those. And then just to know that there are some early discussions as there's different scenarios, discussions underway as far as what does the second half of the year look like for us from a financial standpoint, where staff are running different scenarios. Obviously if the shutdown ends sooner and people are able to get back to work, that's going to play out one way versus if this thing goes on for another couple months or longer. So. But just know that staff are proactively discussing that currently. And then for planning, for planning commission, we met last Monday, and our main item of discussion there was the chapter 10 updates, which are 8 Bravo on our agenda for tonight. That's all I got.
Rick, do you want to do planning?
That was planning, the
sorry.
8B.
Golf
Mike,
committee.
you gonna do golf?
You know what? I couldn't get it online at home, and I'm up at City Hall, and I left all my papers at home. So I would appreciate it if you would.
Okay, thanks. We just talked about this effect, what's gonna happen. Some weddings are gonna get canceled if we can't get everybody in that building. We took a little tour out on the course, looked at some different things over on the local 9, what we're gonna do with that old waterfall. The boards are pretty rotten. The numbers they're hanging in there for food and beverage with all the locals are really supporting them, but they are seeing a little downfall, as this goes on. Other than that, golf numbers are up huge. People are golfing every day, and the other day we had like 275 people, and we didn't run out of carts, so we have the right amount of carts. That was about it.
Yeah, the one other thing is they did set up the restaurant for the tentative
Oh yeah.
placement of tables and whatnot for opening if that happens. And based on the information that Josh has got so far, I think it was like 110 or 120 we could get in there, wasn't it, Troy?
Yeah, it's quite a few because we have such a big banquet hall. They spread them all the way over to the kitchen and then the 2 bar areas.
Yeah, they had the tables quite a ways apart. They could get a lot of people in there. So if they ever get to go back inside, things should improve drastically. That's all I have.
All right, joint planning board was canceled. And then city council did take a city council streets tour. And what council is doing is we're doing a capital tour of our street structure for replacement. A street takes a lot of money to rebuild or rebest in. So it's best that city council visits and to be able to put together a maintenance program in order to provide adequate financial stabilization in order to do it. So we visited Bank Street, Sherburne South, and also Brenda Avenue. So we were able to see it and be able to like really kind of have a good idea what the engineer was telling us, as well as our public service personnel. So it was a very good meeting. Any other committee reports? Hearing none, we'll move on to board, committee, and consultant reports. So wetland credit agreement and application. Mr. Knutson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. In front of you tonight, we have a wetland credit agreement and application that we need for the well development, well number 7 and well house number 4 on the property formerly known as the Olson property. As you know, we've been searching for water for the city for quite some time, and the well that was test pumped is in a reasonably small vein. And because of that, staff, trout wells, and our engineers are a little reluctant to try and reposition that well. Because of that, it's in close proximity to a marsh that's on the property. And as a result, we need to, state code requires us to be 50 feet away from a designated wetland. In this case, we're not. And to get that way, we have to fill in a portion of that wetland. To do that, we have to file for an application and a permit, and we actually have to buy wetland credits through the state process. So it's something that we don't want to do. The negative of it, it's going to cost us about $62,000 to do it. The positive is we're looking to develop 2 potential wells at the same time, whereas we initially thought we were going to go after 1 well. So this could serve a water need, not only now for the city, but well into the future. So we come before you tonight asking for permission to do this. It's basically the application process is what we're starting. We wouldn't expend any funds until the permit goes through and it is accepted, but that would be after the full project comes to council with our full bid numbers. So the permitting process takes between 30 and 60 days typically. So we don't want to slow the process down. We're hoping to have plans and specifications to council the first week in June, so you guys can authorize us to go out for bid. So we're not spending the money right now. We're asking for approval for the application, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware of what the cost would be. So with that, I would ask for a motion to approve resolution 20-35, or I can answer any other questions that you may have at this time.
This is Mike. I have a question. If we were to do the trade, how long would it take for us to do the wetland trade?
We would have to go through, if we looked on that property, we asked that question of our engineers, and asking that, we don't have any property that's designated for wetland that would work in this program. That process would take probably the remainder of the year. They thought anywhere from 6 to 9 months for us to get our land, if we had any, to get it approved for basically a land swap. This land that we're purchasing the credits from is already in the program and has been pre-approved and sitting there waiting for purchases like this.
So we're a difference in time. We're looking at quite a bit then, or?
Correct. We wouldn't make the construction, the 2020 construction season for this well.
Good enough. That's
if we didn't do this. Okay.
That's the only question.
Go ahead.
That was the only question I had.
This is Troy. If no one else has any questions, I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 20-35, authorizing staff to sign a joint application and wetland credit agreement.
This is Mike. I'll second it.
Motion from Mike, second from Mike. Oh, motion from Troy, second from Mike. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Those in favor may state aye. Tracy, aye.
Rick, aye.
Troy, aye.
Mike, aye.
Becky, aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Proposed amendment to Chapter 10, Section 10.21 of City Code. Mr. Lisson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I have for you an RCA and an ordinance asking to amend Chapter 10, Section 10.21 of City Code. Basically deals with, in looking at our weed ordinance and doing the enforcement of that, we discovered that Chapter 7 of our code states that we look at 6 inches as acceptable height for grass and weeds. Chapter 10 had listed as 12 inches. When we discovered this, we thought we should try to make those the same, as it would eliminate any confusion. So we're asking to change chapter 10 so it reads as regularly cut is defined as 6 inches, so it matches chapter 7 of our code. This was brought to Planning Commission. They did discuss it. There were some questions regarding why this wasn't changed, or what has been the normal. Was it 6 inches, 12 inches? So address those questions. And after that, Planning Commission recommended go before council for final approval. So let's see here. Give me 1 second, scrolling. So if there's any other questions about that proposed amendment, I can answer those. Otherwise, a motion and a second to approve that would be appreciated.
Hearing no questions, how does council wish to proceed?
This is Rick. I make a motion to approve the change to ordinance 223 second series, amending chapter 10, section 10.21 of the city code.
This is Troy. I second it.
Motion from Rick, second from Troy. Any other discussion? Hearing no, those in favor may state aye. Tracy, aye.
Rick, aye.
Troy, aye.
Mike, aye.
Becky, I.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion for the summary series?
This is Rick. I make a motion to approve the summary series for publication.
This is
This is
Troy.
Becky, I'll second it.
Motion from Rick, second from Becky. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor may say aye. Tracy, aye.
Rick, aye.
Troy, aye.
Mike, aye.
Becky, I.
Motion passes. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Administrator and staff reports. Declare parcel 60-474-0420 as surplus and intimidate a sales process. Mr. Przezinski.
Mayor, City Council, thank you. Before I go into this action, I would like to, first of all, thank the City Council and our public for their patience getting the meeting up and going this evening. For those that don't know, we lost our internet connection, so we had to improvise, if you will. Our staff, thank you to them as well, because they brought all this together. I know we were a few minutes late launching the meeting, but so appreciate the staff that we have, and they were able to bring the meeting to our general public. So with that, I do have an item for the City Council to consider this evening. Declaring parcel 60-474-0420 as surplus and initiating its sale. Now, this is a lot that the city owns. It's a residential lot. I've been working with the City Council to take whatever property that the city currently owns, figure out if it's needed anymore, if it's not, to get it sold and developed to its highest and best potential, which this lot would certainly fit that need. So this is a lot that we had purchased in Autumn Ridge a decade or more ago, with the intention of putting a park here, but we had also at the same time purchased another lot. So it was basically one of the other lot was going to get a park. The park has been built. We no longer need this lot. I'm recommending to the City Council that we sell this, get it back on the tax rolls. Hopefully we can get a house built on it in the not too distant future, which will also help kind of alleviate some of those housing needs in the community. So with that, I will open it up for questions. Otherwise, a motion to approve declaring parcel 6474-0420 as surplus and ordering its sale.
Has this parcel been for sale prior to this time?
Yep, we had it on the market last year. We had hired a realtor. The goal was to get it sold and to get it built upon. It didn't work the way we had wanted it. We pulled it off the market and we're trying to get it back on the market and sold and developed.
Hearing no other questions, how does council wish to proceed?
This is Rick. I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 20-36, declaring the property owned by the city of Becker as surplus.
It's Mike. I'll second that.
Motion from Rick, second from Mike. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor may state aye. Tracy, aye.
Rick, aye.
Troy, aye.
Mike, aye.
Becky, I.
Motion passes. Extension of declaration of emergency resolution. Chief Balloon.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Well, as
Take a step closer to the.
now that
Kidding.
as you recall, back in March, we passed a resolution 2026 declaring an emergency for the city of Becker. And at that point, we initiated or backdated it to March 13th, and then put the next time frame, if you will, to reevaluate 8 weeks in advance. Well, my apologies. That kind of crept up on us pretty quick. So there's late notice on that, obviously. So realize that yesterday, Greg and I spoke about it and wanted to make sure we got it in front of you for tonight for some discussion or just to do whatever. So what was put together was a update of the declaration, kind of reflecting a couple of things. Basically, as we know, this is not going to go away anytime soon. However, we know there's been some changes. Couple of things. We know that the declaration for the state was advanced to May 13th. May 13th. The stay-at-home order goes to May 18th. And of course, our declaration ends on the 8th. So we would be short a little bit of time there. But since the start of this, as you know, we've Minnesota in general and even different counties encountered a lot, and the numbers continue to climb. So obviously the idea of trying to extend the declaration helps the city in several ways. There's a financial thing with FEMA. As you know, one of the things I've been working on with the county is a reimbursement, how that process is going to work potentially. So we just last week got notified our information has been accepted by FEMA. Actually, that's a state approval. Doesn't mean we get anything yet. However, it gives us the ability to be able to put in. When we do put in, the declaration has to go with that. So we want to make sure we're including everything with that. And we've been doing that. Department heads have been providing me documentation, purchases of time spent on COVID-related things, et cetera. Additionally, it gives the council much more flexibility as needed, as we see here tonight. The digital portion of a council meeting, if you will, is allowed under the declaration. So the closing of City Hall, if need be, for an extended period of time, which we've seen a lot of different changes, obviously, with our facilities. This allows us to do that as well. So the idea, again, going forward, I did check with Scott Lepak. He recommended we actually do this because it puts us in a position that there are no questions of following the state declaration right now, which will expire. So he said move forward. Now, remember, at any point, we can pull it back. So if we do get to the 18th and all of a sudden, and let's hope in some ways that the governor releases a bunch of things, we can pull back if we need to. In addition, the League of Minnesota Cities gave me something similar today or this afternoon, that we are obviously protected by the governor's declaration. However, the recommendation is cities have their own. So again, what has been put together is to extend the declaration out to May 31st. And that the date was kind of chosen just in an effort to give us enough time if we decide to need it. So that goes past the 18th. Obviously, the stay-at-home order goes till then. And again, if we need to pull back, we certainly can, but it just gives us time. Some of the things we are going to have to work on are some plans for our individual facilities if we do open them. You know, and of course, getting employees back, that sort of thing, and how we're going to kind of work them back into the fold. So, so what has been put to you as a resolution 2037, which is the declaration, extending the declaration of emergency for the city of Becker. And at this point, I'd certainly answer any questions, but a motion and a second to approve that would be appreciated.
This is Rick. I just wanted to thank you for going through this. I had asked to pull this from the consent agenda to the regular agenda just for this purpose, just because the first time we did this, we did it in special meetings. So it's just more so to, you know, maybe we're familiar with this, but, you know, there's a lot of folks that may not be. So, and they say, well, what, you know, what exactly does an emergency declaration do? And so, you know, I had asked some questions in the email, and so you covered those here tonight. So thank you very much for doing that.
No problem. And one thing for those that may see this down the road, we're not trying to restrict the general public. It's trying to help government operations function. And that's what we're after here. So, and I would certainly encourage those with questions to certainly reach out to, in this case, Greg or I. We can do the best we can. But at this point, we just feel this is the best course of action moving forward under the current conditions. And if we, again, please remember, if there's a need to pull back after the 18th, we can certainly do that. One thing Scott Lepak in the league did say is that it just gives us the authority that follow what the governor does. And if he starts taking a step back, we can follow suit. So that's kind of where we're at.
Just kind of, I do have one kind of follow-up question. Let's say we get to, the, would it be the 18th or whatever, the governor gives somewhat of a loosening of the order. Can we like open up City Hall, do things like that without actually rescinding the emergency order? We don't have to rescind the emergency order in order to take some of those precautions back, right?
My understanding is that's correct. We are allowed to do that. Now, we can either let the operation expire on the 31st, or we can call, you know, kind of a special, well, it would be a special meeting if we wanted to eliminate it. So we can do that as well. And that'd be at the council's, you know, discretion, how they wanted to deal with that, I suppose. Any other questions? Otherwise, yeah, just a motion and a second to approve 20-37 would be appreciated.
This is Rick. I'll make a motion to approve resolution 20-37, which would be the extension of the declaration of emergency from City of Becker.
This is Mike. I'll second it.
Motion from Rick, second from Mike. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor may state aye. Tracy, aye.
Rick, aye.
Troy, aye.
Mike, aye.
Becky, I.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Payment of the bills.
I make a motion, we pay the bills. Oh, this is Troy.
This is Rick. I second we pay the bills.
Motion from Troy, second from Rick. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor may say aye. Tracy, aye.
Rick, aye.
Troy, aye.
Mike, aye.
Becky, I.
Motion passes. We'll go back up to the consent agenda, can finish that. Mr. Brzezinski.
Mayor, City Council, thank you. We do have a revised consent agenda this evening. Items 1 through 3 are all hiring and termination report forms. One from the Becker Community Center, one from our Public Services Division, and one from Pebble Creek Golf Club. Item number 4 is a farm lease with Kyle Golly for the years 2020 through 2025. And then item number 5 is a revision to a purchase agreement. I believe was repurchase lot 3, block 1 of Becker Furniture World, first edition, which is resolution 20-34. And then item number 6, of course, we just covered as a separate agenda item. So with that, if there are questions, I'll certainly try to address those. Otherwise, a motion to adopt the consent agenda for May 5th, 2020 would be appreciated.
This is Rick. I make a motion to drop the consent agenda as presented.
This is Troy. I second it.
Motion from Rick, second from Troy. Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor may say aye. Tracy, aye.
Rick, aye.
Troy, aye.
Mike, aye.
Becky, I.
Motion passes. Anniversary announcements for the month of May. Bill Knudsen is celebrating his first year with the City of Becker as a Public Services Director. And Kristen Hines, the Administrative Support Specialist at the Police Department, is celebrating 2 years with us. Congratulations to those folks. I again will thank council for their patience for this evening, as we are unable to control the internet and the Wi-Fi as well as the cell phone towers. So thanks for sticking together. And does council have anything else for the betterment of Becker?
Nope.
Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
This is Troy making a motion to adjourn.
This is Rick, a second.
Motion from Troy, second from Rick. Those in favor may state aye. Tracy, aye.
Rick, aye.
Troy, aye.
Mike, aye.
Becky, I.
Motion passes. We are adjourned at 7:00 p.m. Thanks, everybody.
Peace.